The rideshare driver barely said a word when he pulled up to the curb. Just a nod, a beep of the car unlocking. I stepped out slowly, pulling my suitcase behind me, the wheels making soft crunches on the gravel. There it was, the house. White columns still holding up the porch like proud shoulders. But the lawn was overgrown, the once blooming azaleas choked by weeds. The blinds were shut tight, even though it was just after 5 and sunlight still kissed the windows. It used to be warm here, a place of Sunday roasts, backyard birthdays, and the hum of my dad's old radio on Saturdays. Now it looked like a house trying to disappear. I stood there a few moments longer than I should have, waiting for something. Maybe a welcome. Maybe regret. But the door cracked open and my mother's voice met me halfway. "Oh, you're here early." Not a smile, not a hug, just that. I rolled my bag up the steps. She didn't move to help. Her arms were crossed, casual, calculated. Inside, the air was cooler than expected, not from air conditioning, just distant. Dad walked by the foyer, barely glancing up from whatever he was pretending to read. "Didn't know you were staying long," he mumbled. "I told you I was coming," I said. He nodded vaguely. "Right." I had been gone for almost 2 years. No one said they missed me. No one asked why I suddenly wanted to visit. I guess no one wanted to ask. Mom walked ahead toward the kitchen. "Do you want tea?" "I'm fine." The last time we spoke on the phone, her tone was clipped. Said she was dealing with things but wouldn't explain. I figured something was off then. But now it was louder than words. In the living room, the leather armchair Dad used to claim every evening. Gone. The family portrait from my high school graduation. Gone. The shelf held trinkets I didn't recognize. Too sleek, too modern, not theirs. I touched the edge of the fireplace mantel. "What happened to the photo wall?" "Oh, things get dusty. We packed some stuff away." I turned to her. "Packed it away or replaced it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled open a drawer, looking for tea bags she didn't intend to use. In this house, I muttered more to myself than her, silence wasn't golden. It was loaded. She glanced at me, lips tight. "What?" "Nothing." I walked back toward the hallway that used to lead to my bedroom. When I opened the door, I stopped short. No bed, no posters, no bookshelves, just boxes, labeled, stacked. My suitcase dropped from my hand. "You moved my stuff?" "We needed space. You've been out on your own for years now." "You could have told me." Dad appeared behind me. "You've always had your own thing going. You'll be fine." Something inside me stung, but I swallowed it down. Mom's phone rang. She stepped away, lowering her voice as she answered. I caught a word, documents, before the hallway swallowed her voice. I walked into the kitchen again, and that's when I noticed it. An envelope, half tucked under a magazine. The logo of a real estate agency stamped in blue ink. Next to it, the laptop. Open. A subject line bolded. Final closing confirmed. "Is something going on with the house?" Mom returned, paused, glanced at the envelope. "No, just cleaning out some things." I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just spring cleaning. This was a purge. Flashbacks hit me like a slap. Birthdays they skipped, the empty bleachers at my college graduation, the voicemail I left when I got promoted. Never returned. They never really saw me, I thought. And now, they're erasing me. Back in the guest room, because I guess that's what it was now, I began unpacking. Among the boxes, one sat alone on the edge of the dresser. It had my name scrawled on the top, old handwriting, my mother's. I opened it. Inside, the ceramic swan I made in 6th grade. Still chipped from the time it fell behind the TV. Taped to the inside of the lid was a note. "Take what matters. We'll handle the rest." My throat closed up. This wasn't a visit. This was a quiet eviction, a farewell I didn't sign up for. I looked out the window, trying to breathe. That's when I saw him, a man with a clipboard, measuring the length of the driveway. They told me we were just spring cleaning, but I knew better. Something bigger was happening. I woke before the sun. No alarm, just that uneasy stillness that comes when your body knows something's not right. There were sounds downstairs, subtle, unfamiliar creaks, different from the usual rhythm of the house I used to know. It didn't feel lived in. It felt managed. I threw on a sweater and padded down the hallway. More boxes, neatly stacked by the door. Labels in bold black marker. March 4th, pickup. Consignment, dining set. To storage. The kitchen was spotless. Too spotless. The smell of coffee or bacon or even burnt toast, absent. My mother always cooked, even if she was mad. This wasn't absence. This was intention. And there, on the counter, lay a business card. Glossy, clean. Southern Estates, Liquidation Property Services. A number scribbled on the back, not theirs. I stepped outside to breathe. The morning was gray, damp. A car I didn't recognize pulled out from the driveway, logo on the side. Willowbrook Realty. They didn't even hide it anymore. How can a house you grew up in feel like a hotel you weren't supposed to check into? I whispered. I walked back in, passing the dining room. The door was slightly ajar. I paused. She'll be fine, my father said, low and clipped. She won't know until it's done. It's better this way. She's always been sensitive, my mother answered, her voice strained. I don't want another argument. I stood frozen in the hallway. A pressure built behind my eyes, but I didn't let it spill. So that's what I was now. Sensitive. A loose end they didn't know how to tie off neatly. I walked away before I heard more. Sat on the stairs with my hands in my lap. Breathing slowly. The locks, the empty room, the avoidance. It wasn't just neglect, it was strategy. They sold the house, and I just didn't get the memo. Later, when they pretended it was another morning like any other, I didn't play along. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, waited until they both sat down. Are we selling the house? Silence. Then my mother, after a glance at my father, said, It's been finalized. The paperwork's done. You were never on the deed, Dad added, like that made it all make sense. I wasn't asking about legality, I replied, keeping my voice even. I was asking why you didn't tell me. We're retiring differently than planned, he said, sipping his coffee. Things change. We had to let some things go. Let some things go. They spoke in terms of business. Downsizing. Rebalancing assets. But all I heard was, you don't belong. You could have called. You could have said something before I booked the flight. They looked at each other again and said nothing. It wasn't just that they sold it. It was that they didn't think I had a right to know, not just shut out. Erased. Later that afternoon, I walked through the house. Every corner felt smaller, colder. Like it knew it was being discarded. In the hallway mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized. The memories rushed in, teaching myself to make pasta when they worked late, sitting cross-legged under the Christmas tree, hanging ornaments alone because no one remembered it was December 1st. I wasn't mourning the house. I was mourning the illusion that it was ever mine. You're independent, my mother said when I pushed again. We thought you wouldn't care. I met her eyes. I stopped needing you. That's different from not caring. She blinked fast, tears rising, but no apology came. Just a look that said she regretted I was even here. Dad folded his arms. This isn't personal. It's practical. It always was with him. Always numbers, not names. I left the conversation without a word. Nothing left to say. Nothing that would matter. I climbed to the attic. Dust floated in slices of late afternoon light. Boxes and bins, relics of forgotten lives. One box sat apart, small. Unlabeled in my handwriting, for my real home someday. Inside, an old sketchbook. Pages yellowed. Scribbled drawings of houses I imagined living in one day. One page stopped me cold. A little home with my name on the mailbox. Big windows, no shadows inside. That sketch hit harder than I expected. It reminded me of something I forgot I had. A vision of belonging. A claim. If this house was never really mine, fine. But one day, something would be. Not today. Not yet. But but I wasn't leaving just because they wanted me to fade quietly. I walked down the stairs, stepped out onto the back porch. The yard was bare now, the swing set gone, but I could still hear the echoes. My younger self laughing, flying, dreaming, not anymore. Now I just sat, still, watching, waiting. I was halfway down the driveway when my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Ms. Carla, an old friend of Mom's. I answered because something inside me said I needed this. "Hi, Mint," she said, voice too bright. "I'm glad the paperwork went through smoothly. You settling in okay?" My chest froze. Paperwork, smoothed over, like they'd erased me long ago. "What paperwork?" I asked, my voice small. "Oh, you know, the sale." "We all agreed it was best," Carla said lightly, as though she were discussing a garden party. "They said you'd understand eventually." I hung up before I responded. Betrayal no longer felt vague. It had a voice, a face. Carla, someone I trusted, helped them keep me blind. Later, under dim garage light, I pried open a box labeled Private, Dad's Tools. Inside was Mom's keep-safe trunk, wrapped in dust and neglect. I found the journal inside, leather-worn. I ran my fingers over the cover, hesitated, then opened it. Page after page, entries full of dates, holidays, names. A detail leapt out. "She's like a tenant in this house, always watching, never really here." My name barely whispered. I read and reread. That line echoed louder than any shout. I was never the daughter, just someone tolerated. The memory hit me suddenly, age 14, standing awkward on stage for my piano recital. Dad promised he'd be there. Mom said she'd come. They arrived late, shuffled in while I finished playing. I swallowed tears so no one would see. Now the journal entry for that same evening. Ted closed the Peterson deal today. Big win. No note of the recital. Nothing. That was when the illusion cracked. The pain became clarity. I never mattered in their ledger of priorities. I walked through the house collecting only what meant something. The journal, my old debate trophy. A single photo from the hallway, me laughing, in a red dress. I left my high school diploma behind. I didn't need proof to them. I needed proof to myself. I typed a message to a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Got a couch to spare?" I hit send. I planned to vanish, but not from fear, by design. They found me later, packing. Mom's voice trembled. "Is this about your journal? You always took things too personally." I looked her in the eye and said, "I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm leaving because I'm finally strong." She tried to interrupt. I held up the journal. "Don't talk. I'm not emotional. I'm informed." I left them standing there. In my hand, keys and truth. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen like it was enemy territory. Mom was at the counter, spreading jam on toast. Dad sat at the table, sipping black coffee, eyes glued to nothing in particular. Neither looked up. No one said a word about last night, not even a nod, like nothing had happened. The smell of bacon and toast, normally comforting, hit me wrong. It felt like someone trying to paint over cracked walls. Then came her voice, light, rehearsed. "They're running a sale on that granola you like. 2 for 1. I stared at her for a second. She kept her eyes on the toast, not even a twitch of acknowledgement. I sat, poured coffee, played along. Nice. No one said anything else. Just chewing, sipping, the clink of silverware. But I listened harder than I ever had. That kind of silence, it screamed. They were pretending this was a family breakfast. I'd done that dance before. Not this time. I watched how they avoided each other's gaze. How every movement was choreographed to avoid mine. Every gesture, every smile, hollow. There was no grief here, just performance. Mid-morning, I walked down the hallway toward the garage, passed by Dad's study. Door cracked, voices inside. His and hers, on speakerphone. "Once the deposit clears," Dad said, "we can finally make the move. That villa's money is freedom." Mom replied, "We'll finally get away from all this emotional drama. I'm done walking on eggshells." I didn't breathe. They weren't staying. This wasn't about retirement near home. They were leaving, gone, out of state. and they were funding their escape with what used to be my home. I pulled my phone from my pocket and recorded the last few lines, not because I planned revenge, but because I needed something to remind myself I wasn't crazy. Proof that I didn't make this up. At lunch, I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I placed my phone on the table, hit play, let it fill the room. Mom stopped mid-bite. Dad's jaw clenched. No one reached to stop the recording. "You could have just said it," I said steady. "You sold my home to escape me." Dad looked me dead in the eye. "We needed peace. You've always made things harder than they had to be." I took a long breath, not out of pain, out of calculation. "I wasn't the weight," I said. "I was the wall you leaned on. You just didn't know it." They stayed silent. I didn't cry. Not this time. That would have given them comfort. Instead, I gave them clarity. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the old desk chair and made a list. What to take, what to leave, who to call. I texted Aunt Renee in Seattle. "Mind if I come stay a few weeks?" Then I logged on, started reading legal aid forums, opened a fresh bank account in my name, used every dollar I had in birthday cards, tutoring gigs, random savings. This wasn't panic. This was planning. They called it drama. I called it response. That evening, I left a printed transcript of the call on the kitchen counter. Highlighted, clean, undeniable. On top of it, I placed a sticky note. "I have more copies. Let's see who believes in emotional manipulation now." Dad came in first, read the top page, crumpled it, tossed it in the trash, but his hand shook. I saw it. Mom walked in, glanced at the trash, then at me. "You're being dramatic," she muttered. "No," I replied, looking her square in the eye. "Strategic. There's a difference." I walked out of the kitchen. As I reached the top of the stairs, I whispered to myself, "They never saw me coming." Because they never saw me at all. I hadn't spoken much all morning, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I was finally starting to understand the power of quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind they used to shame or suppress, the kind that calculates, the kind that waits for the right time to speak. I scrolled through old contacts, thumb hovering over familiar names, until I found Nina's. Law school days felt like another lifetime ago, but she always had a good sense of justice, not the textbook kind, the human kind. I sent a short message. Quick legal question. What rights does a grown child have if her family sells her childhood home behind her back? She replied faster than I expected. Legally? Not much unless your name's on it. Morally? You've got a mountain. We went back and forth. She sent over links on emotional coercion, elder abuse statutes, and even asset concealment cases. I took notes. I didn't expect to sue my parents. I wasn't that naive. But something about having the language gave me structure, a way to name what they did, and once you can name it, you can fight it. I started recording their conversations casually. Nothing dramatic. Just patterns, tone, repeated phrases. They weren't going to gaslight me again. Not when I had timestamps. And every time I hit record, I remembered. They raised me to keep things calm, stay neutral, be agreeable. They didn't expect me to fight back because they trained me to stay quiet. Tuesday evening rolled in. Time for the weekly family Zoom call. The kind of digital circus where everyone wore smiles like masks. Usually, I stayed on mute, camera off. This time, I showed up early, camera on, face forward. Uncle Roy was telling a fishing story. Cousin Danielle bragged about her twins. Then Dad, like he was dropping good news at a church potluck, said, "We're excited for the next chapter." "Starting fresh somewhere warmer." I interrupted before he could finish the sentence. "You mean selling your house and pretending I never lived there?" The room fell still. Screens flickered. Aunt Marla leaned forward. Grandma stopped crocheting mid-stitch. My mother's voice came in sharp. "That's not what this call is for." I held up the sale document on camera, clear and close. "Just so everyone knows," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I found out like the rest of you. After the fact, I wasn't consulted. I wasn't considered. I was erased." The chat box lit up. "Wait, what? What's she talking about?" Dad cut in. "She misunderstood. It's more complicated than that." "Funny," I said. The truth's always complicated when you're the one lying. Grandma was the last voice, quiet but firm. I thought we raised people better. Silence again. And then, the call ended. No goodbyes, no reactions, just a window closed. Back in my room, I stared at the wall. I didn't feel proud, I didn't feel like I won, but I did feel real, seen, finally. Later that night, Mom knocked on my door. Not even 2 hours had passed. That was unnecessary, she said through the door. I opened it, stared at her. So was selling my home and calling it peace. She didn't argue, she just turned and walked down the hall. Dad didn't speak to me. I heard drawers slamming in his office, the kind of loud that replaces conversation. I pulled out my own journal. Wrote one line. If they won't remember my place in this family, I'll make sure others do. Then I started uploading everything, recordings, photos, receipts, messages, to a secure drive. Sent backup to a trusted friend's email. It wasn't about revenge, it was about documentation, so no one could rewrite my story later. Before bed, I walked downstairs. On the fridge, I used the whiteboard Mom always kept spotless to write one thing. Your daughter is not disappearing quietly. Signed, me. I stood there for a second, then turned and left without looking back. In my room, I mapped out a rough plan. Nothing rushed, but steady. Seattle with Aunt Renee was still in play. I made a budget, sketched a timeline. What I take with me, dignity, truth, strategy. I looked at the mirror. An old quote was taped there. Something from a counselor in middle school. Keep the peace. I tore it off. Wrote a new one. Sometimes peace is the absence of injustice. I folded 2 shirts, a sweater, and a notebook into a small suitcase. Just the start. I wasn't leaving tonight, but I would. And when I did, it'd be by my own hand, not theirs. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the Alcott's place, the sky was dipping into evening. Lights flickered on across the backyard like little stars strung between trees. The folding chairs were already half filled. I had chosen my outfit carefully. Plain, classic, neutral tones. The kind of look you wear when you don't want to be talked about, but you plan to be seen. A few heads turned when I walked through the gate. Some familiar faces nodded, others didn't bother. I saw Aunt Shelley's glance linger a bit too long, like she wasn't sure if she should smile or look away. It didn't bother me. I knew what I walked into. The host gave me a half-hearted welcome. Glad you could make it. Better late than never. He gestured toward the snack table like that fixed anything. I caught snippets of conversation as I moved toward the edge of the yard. Someone mentioned the housing market. It's brutal lately. Shame about the Crane Villa, really. Timing's tough. They said it like it was weather. As if the sale of that house didn't gut the life out of someone. As if it didn't matter that someone still lived there, emotionally, if not legally. But I didn't show up for comfort. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was here to be heard. I took a seat not far from the main circle, not isolated, but not eager. I wanted to be placed, not pitied. And then, like clockwork, the whisper became noise. "Mint," my cousin Jeremy called across the patio. "Do you even own anything now? Or did they take that too?" The words dropped like stones. Laughter followed. Light, sharp, cruel. A few chuckled nervously. My mother let out a dry laugh, like she wasn't quite sure which side to land on, but didn't want to seem uptight. Bramwell shifted in his seat beside her, eyes darting between faces, unsure if he should defend or stay invisible. Another guest added, louder than needed, "She's just the one who paints pictures, not property." The way they said it, flippant, smug, made it clear. To them, I was the decorative daughter, the one who floated, the one who didn't stick. And then someone said it quietly, not loud enough for the whole group, but enough for me to hear. Let her speak. So I did. I stood slowly. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. I felt something steadier than rage. "You're looking at someone you erased," I said clearly, scanning the faces now drawn to me like a car crash. "And you still don't see me." Silence. Then, from beside my chair, I picked up the rolled blueprint I'd brought. I walked forward, found an empty side table, and unfurled it like a banner. Thick paper, faded edges, bold lines drawn by a hand that hadn't forgotten its worth. Designed by Mint Crane, the title block read. Client, Blackthorn Estate. There were murmurs. Low, confused. Aunt Margie leaned forward. Someone took a photo. I pointed to the corner. Stamped, signed, revision notes. Mine, this house, the one they sold without telling me. I helped design it. I laid out rooms, light, structure. I built more than memories. I built its bones. Drusilla, for once, had nothing to say. Her face turned pale. Her fingers tightened around her glass. I let the blueprint sit there. I didn't move to roll it back up. The air shifted. A few people clinked their glasses awkwardly. A cousin whispered to another. My uncle, the one who'd never said more than, "How's work?" in passing, said softly, to no one in particular, "I never realized." Drusilla found her voice. "She's twisting facts. This is all dramatics. She didn't build anything. She sketched." Bramwell, eyes still downcast, added, "Let's not make this something it isn't." But it already was. I didn't reply to either of them. I didn't have to. The silence that followed spoke louder. People who had once smiled at my mother now looked through her. Some avoided my eyes, not out of rejection, but recognition that they'd bought into something. And now it didn't quite fit. Truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits on the table, surrounded by wine glasses and stunned faces, and waits. I stayed a little longer, not to bask in it, but to watch the shift. You can feel it when the tide turns. You can feel it when someone loses the room. And tonight, it wasn't me. Later, I gathered my things. My blueprint remained on the table. I didn't need to carry it anymore. Its message had landed. As I passed the gate, I heard footsteps behind me. "Mint," my mother called, catching up. "We can talk." I stopped, looked at her. "We already did," I said. "You chose half-truths." Then I walked on, out into the night. I wasn't just leaving a party. I was leaving ignorance. Thursday evening settled over the house like a low ceiling. I walked from room to room with quiet intention, checking details, setting papers in place like chess pieces. The living room had been rearranged, enough chairs for everyone, but close enough that no one could pretend they hadn't heard what was said. I'd called Rowena that morning. She didn't ask many questions, just said, "Tell me what time," and promised to bring the documents. She showed up with a small file folder, worn at the corners, the kind that had been kept too long in silence. Lysander arrived shortly after, not with fanfare, just a nod. He placed a plain envelope on the table and took a seat by the bookshelf. No introductions, no explanation, just presence. That was enough. My parents were the last to enter. Drusilla came in brisk, chin lifted. Bramwell followed, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding eye contact. I handed out copies, blueprints, journal scans, notes I'd taken over the years. Nobody touched them right away. Inside me, something stilled. I wasn't angry, not tonight. Tonight, I was done being quiet. From the hallway, I brought in a small locked box I'd pulled from Drusilla's office earlier that day. I placed it on the table, opened it, and took out the envelope inside. Yellowed, folded neatly, addressed in familiar ink. To my darling Drew. I held it up before anyone could speak. This was in her drawer, next to financial records and deeds. It's dated almost 22 years ago. I unfolded it and began reading. "She's not like Bram," the letter said. "He makes sense to me. He reflects back what I understand. Ambition, success. But Mint is mystery. I know I should try harder, but sometimes I feel like I only have so much to give." My voice didn't crack, not once. "She wants love," it went on. "But I only have strategy. I feel guilt. But guilt doesn't build bridges." I looked up. Drusilla's face had gone rigid. Bramwell's hands were clenched, knuckles white. "I wished for love," I said quietly. "You budgeted it." I let the silence hang there, not as punishment, as proof. Then I walked over to the TV and pressed play on a USB stick Lysander had helped me retrieve last week. A deposition, dry, recorded, legal, from an old inheritance case, not involving me directly, but her voice was unmistakable. The screen lit up. Drusilla sat across from a lawyer. "She paints," she said flatly. "That's her world. The house, the estate, that's business. It's not about feelings. I needed someone to handle legacy, not watercolors." There were gasps. Someone whispered, "She really said that?" Drusilla stood abruptly. "That was years ago. It was out of context." "Context," I said, not raising my voice, "is a choice. And that was yours." Bramwell moved to step in. "This is theater, Mint. You're twisting this. I'm showing what you've hidden." "Enough," he snapped. "You're embarrassing her." "No," I said. "She embarrassed herself the moment she pretended I didn't exist." The room was still. A few ants shifted uncomfortably. An uncle glanced toward the door. Nobody said Drusilla was right. Rowena stepped forward, not saying much, just stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder. Her presence spoke more than words could. Then the phone rang. Bramwell pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and walked out without a word. A whisper followed him. "Investor. The villa." I turned to the rest of the room. "This isn't just about them," I said. "It's about every time someone told me to let it go, because it was easier than facing the truth." No one interrupted me now. I left the room. In my bedroom, I packed a small bag, just a few essentials. My sketchbook. That letter. I stood at the door of Drusilla's office one last time. "I don't want a piece of the past," I said, without bitterness. "I want a future I own." I shut the door gently behind me. My footsteps echoed through the hallway like a bell being rung. And from the other side of that closed door, I said what I needed to say. This house will never be silent again. Late Friday afternoon, I pulled into the driveway of the villa one last time. No intention of staying, no need to knock. I used my key. Still worked. Funny how many doors remain unlocked when people believe you've already left for good. The air inside was still, thick. I moved through the house like I was gathering echoes, not belongings. Grabbed a small duffel from the corner of my old room, then turned into the hallway. Drusilla stood there, arms folded, eyes cold. "You'll take nothing more from this house," she said. I didn't argue. I pulled the folder from my bag and opened it slowly. Inside, the stamped copies of the house deed, the deposition printout, and my journal scans, highlighted, cross-referenced, and Bramwell's name on every corner. Her eyes flicked fast over the contents. Then she lunged. She tried to tear the folder from my hands. We struggled, not violently, not theatrically, just two people locked in a quiet, awful tug of war. I didn't let go. "Don't you dare!" I said through clenched teeth. Bramwell walked in mid-motion. "What the hell is going on?" I turned to him, still holding the folder. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to finish." He stepped forward. "That's private. You have no right." "You're right," I said. "But you gave up your rights when you forged my name." I set the folder down on the entry table, opened to the page with the signature. Then I took out my phone and pressed play. The audio was clear, clipped from a recorded legal review weeks back. Bramwell's voice admitting under pressure. We needed the sale to go through. She wasn't cooperating. So yes, we pushed the paperwork. I signed it, under advisement. The room stilled. Then I pulled the final sheet from the folder. The public disciplinary notice from the state bar. Bramwell Crane, under investigation. Pending suspension. Drusilla's face went white. "You set him up." "No," I said. "I just stopped covering for him." For a long second, no one moved. Then Bramwell slumped back against the wall like he'd been hit. Everything about him shrank. Power doesn't disappear. It just shifts. And right then, it shifted to me. I didn't stay for the fallout. I walked through each room slowly, deliberately. No tears, no nostalgia. I touched the edge of the piano where I used to play. Ran my fingers across the wooden frame of the dining room mirror. In my old bedroom, I placed the echo necklace on my childhood desk, the one I used to draw on when the rest of the house shut me out. I left a note beneath it. "This is mine again." I took down the big family portrait in the hallway, the one they'd updated without me. On the back, I signed it. Just a name. Just a reminder. I turned on the hallway lights. All of them. Let the brightness stretch into corners that had stayed dim for too long. Then I stepped outside. The sun was low, casting the driveway in gold and shadow. I'd barely made it to the car when Drusilla followed me. "You'll regret this," she called after me. I didn't turn right away. Then I did. And I didn't yell. Didn't flinch. "I've lived my years in regret," I said. "Not anymore." I handed her a copy of my journal. She stared at it like it was fire. "Read it," I told her. "Every page you ignored." Bramwell stood behind her, silent. A neighbor paused on their porch across the street, watching. I opened the car door, got in, set my bag in the passenger seat. I took one last look at the villa. It wasn't mine anymore, and it never had been. But the story, that was different. I started the engine. As I pulled away, I saw the necklace, somehow, swinging gently from my rearview mirror. I'd forgotten I had a second copy. It dangled there, glinting in the twilight. And behind me, just barely, I could hear her sob, but it didn't pull me back. I wasn't fleeing. I was choosing. The villa grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The dusk stretched ahead like a road I hadn't walked yet. And for the first time, the silence felt like mine. Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the gauzy curtains of my new apartment. The place was small, still smelled like cardboard and paint, but it was mine. The ocean breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the hum of traffic and distant waves. Not yelling, not footsteps down a marble hallway, just life. I padded across the floor barefoot, boiled water, dropped a tea bag into my favorite chipped mug. That quiet. It didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like breath. Like standing in your own shoes for the first time in years. I turned the kettle off before it screamed. Sat down at the little desk I'd wedged by the window. The sun hit the wood just right, made everything glow. I took a deep sip, then heard the buzz of my phone. One new email, no name, just the subject line. "We share more than you know." Curious, cautious, I opened it. It was a scanned letter, handwritten, neat cursive, blue ink. It started with, "Hi Mint, my name is Eliza. I think we may be sisters." She explained she was born in Colorado 49 years ago. Her mother had worked at a legal firm where Bramwell once consulted. They'd had an affair, brief and quiet, but it left something behind. Her tone was kind, not demanding. She included old medical forms, a copy of a journal entry from her mother, and a DNA report. It matched. There was no guessing. "I saw your face in an article about the villa. I knew. I've seen that expression in the mirror." She made no claims, no accusations. "I'm not looking for inheritance," she wrote. "Just someone else who knows what it's like to be made invisible." I leaned back in my chair. Heart quiet, mind loud. Even now, after everything, the family kept unfolding. She ended the letter with, "If you ever want to talk, I'd be grateful. Just know, you're not alone in your bloodline." I sat with it all day. That evening, just before sunset, I folded the letter into my jacket pocket and drove toward the cliffs. And there's a park I go to where the land just stops. Ocean beneath, wind around, like the edge of the world is always waiting for you to decide. I sat on a bench with the letter in my lap, let my fingers trace the folds. I could have called her right then. I had the number. I pulled out my phone, pressed her name, let it ring once, then ended the call. Not because I was scared, not because I didn't want to know her, just because for the first time, I wanted to move forward on my own terms. That was new, and it felt honest. On my way back, I stopped at a little cafe my mom used to take me to when I was small. The booths hadn't changed. Same checker tile floor, same humming lights. I ordered coffee. Black, no sugar. At the next table, a young mother argued with her daughter. Frustrated, sharp. The girl looked down at her shoes, said nothing. I almost stepped in, but I stopped. That wasn't mine to fix. That's not my role anymore. I took out my journal. Not the legal one, the real one. The one nobody reads but me. I wrote about the letter, about Eliza, about the cliffs, and then I just sat, let myself feel like a whole person, not someone else's unfinished chapter. On the way home, I didn't play music, just rolled down the windows, let the wind talk. That night, I recorded a voice memo, just for me. You're not broken. You're finally unboxed. All those years you thought you were being pushed out. Maybe you were just meant to walk away. I paused, then added softly, don't forget, you built this piece. You earned it. I didn't upload it, didn't send it. Some stories you keep. Some stories you carry, not to relive, but to remember how far you've come.